welcome to the Bytes and Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Demoranville. Today we have a special guest with us, James Nasella. We had quite the energetic conversation, drawing the fascinating parallels between the worlds of food safety and cybersecurity, two seemingly different industries, but as you'll find out, we have a lot more in common than you think. Enjoy the episode. Really appreciate your time. We're just going to jump in with my two favorite questions out of all the questions I ask everybody who joins is, what is your favorite food and your favorite food memory?
My favorite food is mint chocolate chip ice cream, and favorite food memory. I would say favorite food memory, and it's a ridiculous story. I cooked Christmas dinner one time at my grandparents' house and did risotto with scallops and mushroom soup, and we did spaghetti and meatballs just like for the kids. Everybody ate the spaghetti and meatballs, and hardly anybody. All the other real nice food that we cooked, everyone's like, "Oh, it looks really nice." They just ate the spaghetti and meatballs.
Oh man, risotto is like such a pain to cook. So like, I feel for you on that. I don't make risotto just for that reason. It's just too tedious, and I don't have time for that in my life. But that stinks. Did you at least eat what you cooked? A little bit of it, or?
It was delicious. The scallops, I tried to cook them, and it's perfect temperature. They were one of those real thick scallops too. And then the risotto was cranberry risotto.
Oh. I'm already ready to come to Christmas then, because like that sounds awesome. And with mint chocolate chip ice cream, your favorite food, do you prefer it with the food coloring of green or white?
Oh, green. Green with like the shards of chocolate in it, not the
chunks.
Like hard chunks.
Yeah, I hear that. I think that's also how I prefer it. It's less difficult to eat. It's just more smooth with a spoon, right? You just get in there.
It's a more enjoyable texture. Like when you get those real like large chunks, because it's not real chocolate in ice cream because the fat's different. So it's just like you get that waxiness if the chocolate's too thick.
And I'm sure you just blew everybody's mind when they're like, wait, it's not real chocolate. These are the fun things that I learn working with all of you, is just these little food tips every day. I get new ones all the time, and I'm just like, I feel like I've been lied to my entire life about everything. So you've heard it here first. There's no chocolate that's real chocolate in ice cream. It's a different type of chocolate.
From a regulatory standpoint, it's not real chocolate in the fact that they usually switch the fat out, so it has a lower melting point, because regular chocolate melts higher, so it won't melt as easily in your mouth because of the ice cream. And then, there's a whole entire the food science of ice cream inclusions is really, really cool. With like cookie dough chunks, they have to have certain moisture content because it'll pull it out of the ice cream. But if it pulls too much out, then it gets all mushy. It's really cool stuff.
Wow. Sounds like I need to find somebody who works in the ice cream side of the house, because that sounds really interesting.
It's my dream job. I want to work in ice cream.
I support that for you. Anyways, James, thanks for that. I'm going to let you introduce yourself, since we just had that awesome little bit about, random knowledge that you've shared here. So,
all right. So I'm James Nasella. I'm the Director of Supply Chain Quality at Glanbia Nutritionals. Been there for just over a year, and we are an ingredient and nutrition supplement company covering the whole globe. And before that, I've been in other food ingredient spaces, starches and sweeteners, flavor ingredients, and then all the way back was working at the USDA and research for listeria and ready-to-eat foods. A lot of different background and experience.
I love that it's already diversified. You've gone from, sweeteners to nutrition, and then, your research with listeria. Like that's a lot. And I'm sure you've seen more than you probably could even say in this time frame that we're going to be on, in terms of different aspects of our food system, from the government side to the private side to everything in between. I think a lot of people don't realize that the food companies are privately held. They're not government run. People just assume that the food supply is all government all the time. And it's not. There's a lot of private companies, obviously. And that's what makes it even more of a daunting task to try to organize and create frameworks that work and protect it ultimately.
It's interesting because from a regulatory standpoint, I give credit to the individuals that have to write the regulations, because you have to make it general enough, because it's just the different process differences. Even in like a global company like ours, where we've got different plants that produce totally different products, and you're trying to write internal policies and procedures around food safety and food protection, you're trying to write it general enough that the sites can comply with it and hit those things that they need to hit, but while also making sure that you didn't handcuff everybody, that it's too rigid and too prescriptive. So it's a difficult space, and I give them credit from a regulatory standpoint that they're able to do that. And to your point, there's a balance too, where you have the regulatory piece of they're setting the bars their level. Then there's even private entities and non-government organizations that'll set it even higher. You have to play in those spaces, and it's a dancing act that you have to be able to do and stay abreast of it, because there's so many changes, and then customer changes. It's a mess real quick.
I'm sitting here and I'm having flashbacks. I used to write global policy for Sony back in the day. And what you're saying is resonating heavily with me, because how you write something for the US isn't how you're going to write it for Japan, as you're going to write it for the rest of APAC, the rest of, the world. The regulations that are in Europe are a lot more stringent than they are other places, and vice versa with other places. So what I had to do is write a baseline and have that be what you have to conform to. This is the minimum requirements of how we're going to handle this. And then anything else you do over that is your prerogative, right? If you want to, buy extra systems and do all these extra things to tighten your security, like go for it. But this is the minimum you have to meet. And this is the parallels between our industries, because a lot of it is paperwork, let's be honest. And I'm sorry to say that, I know it's not sexy, because there's two sides of security. You have your InfoSec side, which is your government's risk and compliance side. And then you have your hacker side, which is where people picture the hoodie and the matrix and all that stuff, even though it's not exactly that. It can be, but it's not totally that. And there's this sort of weird disconnect with people when it comes to cybersecurity, that we actually are some of the people that just sit there and write. We are some of the people that just work on controls. There are some people who are doing the cool tech aspect, creating all this different technology to help support. And it's the same with the food industry. I mean, you have auditors, that's all they do is audit, just straight up audit. There's other people that are literally going out and fighting the good fight. Where's the contamination? The investigation, the full on, I don't know, Sherlock Holmes vibes in a way. And then you have the people that are defense, that have the shield, that have to get up and be obnoxiously loud about it and be like, look, you guys, we screwed up. Let's do something about it, and let's get the broom and clean up the mess. So it's so many parallels. And this is why I love what we do here, because I get to yes, we're together. We can do this together. And it's awesome. And that actually is amazing, because it leads into my next question, which is about collaboration anyways. How have you seen the worlds of food protection and cybersecurity intersect?
One of the ones I think about, and it's slowly kind of grown, is in the GFSI and the third-party standard space, where there's clauses in those standards talking about password protecting your critical control points, metal detectors, thermal processing units and all, so they don't get tampered with. And in one sense, it's so people aren't messing with it on the line, so they're not releasing unsafe product just because, the machine went off. But then there's also that intentional adulteration cybersecurity side, where if the person's trying to do actual harm intentionally, you're preventing them from accessing it. And we've kind of seen that growth where I'll say 3 iterations ago, that didn't exist in the standards. They didn't even have it on the radar.
Well, no, because everything was still, pen and paper. It wasn't in this digital space that it is now. And access controls were done via locked door with a key, where now it's a passcode, it's a key fob, a swipey card, biometrics, eye, finger. It has to be more of a combined conversation because of that, right? So we've evolved. I think a lot of people forget how fast the food industry evolves. I mean, innovation is middle name. There's so much cool stuff coming out of the food industry in general.
See, I think that's the interesting thing with the food industry is from the R&D standpoint, there is a lot of creativity. There's a lot of change constantly happening. But from the operations side, in a lot of cases, there isn't that much change. My plant's running fine. I'm producing products safely. I'm producing at a high volume. I don't want to change it. And even though we have all these digital solutions, there's so many food companies out there that are still pen and paper. They're still doing everything analog style. And I give them props for being able to deal with it. But to what we were saying earlier, there's so many records being generated, so much files being generated. It's how do you maintain that? How do you manage it safely and functionally?
Yeah. And also, what are you doing with backups? Is that included in your disaster recovery? I mean, there's questions there. I mean, are you sending your documentation or copies of it off-site? Because that's what we used to do back in the day, was those tapes we downloaded or any docs would just go straight out every day. I think the challenges on either side are still really daunting, either from a food contamination perspective or food safety perspective to a cybersecurity potential breach or data breach or any kind of attack. These bad actors, if you will, both sides of the house, are there to do nefarious things. they will want to hurt somebody or steal something or, make a profit or just be a jerk. Disgruntled employees are a huge challenge, right? Because it's all seasonal workers in some perspectives, or it's, low underpaid wage. It's people show up in factories because they have to, not necessarily because they want to be there. So there's always this challenge of how do we handle access control for people who are only going to be there for like a month? Or what about these third parties that are coming in? Are they going to create more paperwork, but also they're going to be in our facility? What do you think the challenges around digital transformation? Because that's like a huge buzzword right now in the industry, how the boards really want to evolve and digitally transform. But like you said, there's so many that are still, if it's not broke, don't fix it. I'm going to continue using my clipboard and not a tablet.
It's one of those situations where it's ROI. So again, in like R&D, I go and I spend money on a software system to manage my product development and manage all my formulas. There's ROI on that because I can turn around and say, well, I just won this business. I just got sample product to my customer faster. And you can see that ROI, where when you have a Kappa software in a plant for food safety and even just personal safety issues, the ROI isn't that visible. So it makes it that much harder to argue those pieces of why I need this software and why I need to have this in place. And you can make some arguments for ROI on time of, I'm saving X amount of hours from these employees managing it paper-wise, and I can be more efficient. But again, it's still the dollar numbers you can get from R&D and show from R&D always will outweigh anything from a quality standpoint. And I still remember in continuous improvement Greenbelt class when it's, quality is a cost center. and it's like on paper, that's the truth because again, you're not really generating any money, and quality people out there are probably screaming like, no, we cost save. But it's one of those that a lot of the pieces from a basic fundamental standpoint, you're cost center, and R&D will always make the money. Operations, you'll always be able to show it because, hey, I produced product. So the bottom line is insulated.
Yeah, very relatable. IT and cybersecurity are cost centers, right? And they can be quite expensive at times, depending on what needs to be done in terms of any digital transformation or new employees that need to be brought in or new tech that needs to be put in, or if there's upgrades. Upgrades are expensive. Same idea. I feel for the quality people. I do. But they're super important. And in fact, I've spoken to a few here and I have so much respect. And also for sanitation. Damn, those people are, make friends with sanitation people. If you are in the food industry in cyber or IT, please God, they're amazing. They literally know everything about everything in the facility. Who's touched what? Trust me, it's intense.
You will have a lot of anxiety when they come over your house. I'm like, did I clean my kitchen clean enough? Because they will see every little thing.
Oh my goodness. I'm so worried now. I have like this like anxiety moment where I'm like making dinner and stuff and I like go back over and wipe my counter like 5 times, constant wiping, and I'm chasing after my partner. It's become this moment because I'm just so terrified I'll have someone in my house and they're just going to be like, what did you do? Why is this like this? And I'm I didn't know. I'm learning. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about current events. And this is not a name and shame thing. This is not picking on anybody. We're just trying to go through current events that are in the news and talk about what's going on in the food industry and how that intersects with digital and obviously cyber.
One of the big ones, and it's still related to FSMA with the 204 rule with the traceability component. And it ties completely into the digitalization piece where from my contacts, there's confusion on the standpoint of, we have traceability. We have our SOPs and our ERP systems, but when you start looking at the rule and how it's written, it's creating some confusion. So it's one of those where it's, all right, I need to have this level of traceability. And for most food companies, they have that traceability, but what other things do I need to have in place? And it came out of that blockchain type of thought process where I have full visibility of my entire process stream, which on paper sounds really, really good. But from a food ingredient standpoint, it gets so complicated, so convoluted that it's just really difficult to see.
Can you break that down just a little bit for the average person who doesn't understand that particular aspect? Because I find that really fascinating.
And again, this is just high level because I'm still dabbling in it. So basically, this additional rules that are coming out with Smarter Food Safety, they've categorized high-risk food products. So leafy greens, soft cheeses, things like that, where they want additional traceability and more visibility of the supply chain of these products. So if there is a food safety crisis later, we're able to track it with more information back. And if anybody's seen Poison, there's a whole entire section in there about lettuce, and they talk about it.
Yeah, highly recommend that. Make sure you watch Poisons on Netflix.
And I'll pick on like leafy greens for right now, where they're trying to just have the level of traceability to say what farms it came from and find that level of detail, which is really, really good. And when we started to hear all these things about blockchain, we'll be able to see the entire everything all the way back to the farm. And there was companies demoing these things of, we've got this meat product that can go all the way back to the animal that it came from. That sounds really, really good in theory. But when you start dealing with complex systems and foods with ingredients that have multiple components, speaking from like the flavor industry, formulas are your IP. You don't want to share that at all. So if you're trying to have this level of traceability, but then still try to protect your IP, how do we find this balance? And it's not easy.
You know, I was talking about the traceability rule the other day, and someone said, how are we going to trace a blueberry? And I went, you won't. You trace the plant, right? Well, they're like, what if that blueberry fell off during transit and it wasn't part of that plant? And I was like, you're going down this hole and I can't follow. Sorry. like, wow, that's a lot. But that's how you have to think. Like, it's crazy. We can't exactly tag a pea.
Yep.
You know, we can tag the plant and we'll know which part of the field it came out of and possibly what seed it was. Obviously, the farmers tracking records that deeply, which they do. But that's crazy to think that you're going to have that level of traceability right now. Like, that's going to take time. We have to put tech in the field and we have to test it. And it has to be done in a way that the field is picked differently, whether it's for machine or human. It's crazy to think about that. But in a factory, it can be a little more controlled. We know we can tag the bins that they come out of and we can tag where they are in the warehouse. But a lot of people don't know too that some of the food ingredients are combined. And I think this is what's interesting to me, because we have so many sensors and IoT devices that are on these lines now. And you would think that we'd be able to use that and all combine it together. But the problem is they run on different systems and some of them are created for different reasons. This is where I really think that cybersecurity can come alongside the food industry, because we're actually already looking at all of that, right? Anything that is pulling a network IP for the most part, we could put into one of our systems and take a look. So we might be able to actually help and determine when that furnace got turned up too much, or there's too much pressure, or, 9 blueberries hit, the batter instead of 8 that were suspended perfectly for blueberry muffins, And I really think that we're going to have these deeper conversations at some point of how we're going to figure this out, because ultimately I think we hold some keys of keeping foodborne illness down, access control, totally cybersecurity. That's what I'm interested to see, is that particular synergy. Listeners, we're going to take a quick pause and let you breathe. If you're enjoying what you're hearing so far, please hit that like button and subscribe. It would really mean a lot. Are we ready to dive back in? Let's continue. Do you see any other synergies, James?
Customer complaints. Like exactly what you just said, there's just so much data. And when you have customer complaints and then you're trying to do investigations or root cause analysis, well, I need to look in my ERP system. Then I need to look at the complaint handling system that just came in. And then I need to look at my operating system to see, all right, what were the production systems? And then if it's in paper, then I need to go out and look at my batch sheets. And you've got all this data that you need to digest, put together. And let's say it's just a quality complaint and you've got a response time you need to get back in 3 days. You're rushing to try to get that. God forbid it's a food safety issue that you're even further under the gun, and you're trying to compile that as fast as you can. It's not easy, and that's the synergy piece that we really need to think about. And in the food industry, you and I have talked about this with just software. I buy one piece of software and then somebody else buys a piece of software. They're not talking to each other, and in a lot of cases there's overlap.
It's true. I mean, there really is. And it's almost like the security community needs to realize that not only are we there to protect the assets, because that's by definition what we're doing, digital assets, but also at this point, it's a partnership. We're actually have to go deeper. It's about protecting the people that are working with it and beyond to the public. In this particular aspect, I'm sure not all industries, I'm not going to say that for like finance necessarily. I don't think there's anything life-threatening there at this moment. And if there are, please correct me, somebody come for me. I think we really need to take a harder look at our role and responsibility within this sector in terms of what can we do to keep protecting people, because like I said, it goes beyond the digital space for us now because we're too intertwined. And I think that's the futuristic view moving forward, is how do we envision what that looks like? And I see cross-train. I see people who are cross-trained in both fields working together in this, more of this food protection culture vibe, where there'll be food safety and security and defense people that are trained in cybersecurity and how to recognize an attack, just as much as the flip side. The SOC is trained on recognizing when there's been a contamination. And I think that's, I'm excited for that, because I think our food is just going to the whole value is going to go up in the supply chain aspects, which I know you can speak to, James. So I'll let you just run with that. So in terms of a supply chain view, what your futuristic viewpoint for the food industry?
So two of them, and this is one thing that I've had some conversations already about it. One is from an intentional adulteration food defense kind of realm, is how do we assess our supply chain on that? And going back to the one of the beginning topics, we were talking about policy and how things are written. All right, U.S. has intentional adulteration rule. There's PAS 96 that's global. And if I've got global suppliers, all right, how do I assess the supply chain on that to make sure that you have food defense pieces in place so we don't have that risk? Because the supply chain is just that gigantic. And then the other piece on the supply chain, and again, it's assessing it, as the food safety culture piece, where, all right, how do I have a set metric that I can understand my suppliers have a good food safety culture? And it gets even more complicated when you start dealing with ingredient suppliers that maybe they're not food, maybe they're just pure chemicals. And when you go to them and you ask, all right, what are your food safety programs? They'll come back to you and say, well, we're a chemical supplier. We don't need to have a true HACCP program and a true food safety plan per the regulations, because we're just producing X chemical at a chemical refinery. And that's some challenging pieces, especially in the processing aid space. That's one that's really, really challenging because use percentage is so low. It's technically not there in the end product, but it's going into food products during processing. And do I hold them to food safety culture requirements? Do I assess them when they're most likely not going to have those pieces in place? So it's really interesting to look at and try to figure out, all right, how do we measure this? And food safety culture is, I'm afraid to say, a little bit of a buzzword currently, but we're still trying to figure out how to do it in our own plants. And now you look at it and say, all right, well, how do I look at it in the supply chain? And if the rules aren't set for myself and I'm not very clear on how I want to do it, how can I hold my suppliers to it?
That is, again, echoing cybersecurity concerns as well, because cybersecurity awareness culture is a hard one to push out. And this is why I think even if you can't assess from a food safety standard, if we had cybersecurity ruling in those facilities, you're talking about the chemical facilities, you could have some confidence that things are a little bit better because they are held under high regulation for that as well. It's funny how that's critical infrastructure, and we're now just realizing the food's part of critical infrastructure. It is part of the Big 16. And it's interesting that you say that. I was thinking that, nobody really has a good way to handle supply chain aspects at all. There's little chunks that can be bitten off, sure. You could attach security riders, which I highly recommend. There are aspects, are there food safety riders? Is that something we need to do?
So you have it in the terms and conditions and contracts at all, where you'll have basically regulatory requirements, comply with U.S. regulations around food, or if it's in a different country, you have to make sure that you finesse the wording right, where it's compliant to that region. So there's language in the contracts. And that's one thing I'll say from a supply chain quality standpoint. We run into situations in this space where you have the actual legal contract, and then someone will come in after the fact and say, well, we've got a quality agreement that we want you to sign too. And it's like, well, if I'm a lawyer, that's great that you have this quality agreement, but is it really a legal contract? Whereas the other contract that I've signed has the pricing, has all the clauses in it that was created by a lawyer, has more weight. Just put the quality stuff in there. Don't try to create this extra thing that confuses the supplier. And in some cases, it might get get overruled in the court of law.
It's true. And this is why usually I tell people they're going to attach a security rider, do it at your renewal. That way you can roll it right in. That doesn't help when some of these contracts are 3 to 5 years, depending, or longer. The supply chain risk is so huge. How do you accept it? And mitigating it's a whole other conversation, but how do you accept the risks that that are there? And that's hard, especially in a food company, because you're accepting risks that you could be potentially aiding a contamination and outbreak.
It's how you want to collect those risk factors, how you want to analyze it within your risk models. We've got our own that we put together with every single supplier that we have in our supply base. And then it's also connected to the ingredient side, where they're connected, but they should be separate risk assessments, where it's what is the material risk, what is the supplier risk, and then you combine them together. It's not easy. There's a lot of math and there's a lot of finesse that you have to do, because you have suppliers that are making true food ingredients, and then you have other ones that are doing processing aids that maybe the risk is different because that processing aid doesn't have a true food safety risk. And you just have to build that into the math.
We have so many different risk assessments that are run in a food company, right? So many, all the ones you just mentioned. And then there's the cybersecurity risk assessments and things of such. It'd be really interesting. And I don't know if this is a job for like the chief risk officer who would specifically land on, and I'm not picking on them either, but who does handle this. If they all took all the risk assessments and evaluated them all together, would that create a better culture? Like, I always wondered that, and I don't know, is there some kind of are we doing double work? Are we doing too much? Are we doing too little?
I'm on the same wavelength as you, and I think that you should have a comprehensive, I'll call it a risk register. The problem that you run into is each individual person who's assessed the risk, they will automatically think that their risk is the highest priority. That's the challenge piece, that trying to create a level playing field, where from a supply chain piece, I'll say when you're trying to make supplier scorecards, all right, supply chain and the procurement group will have certain metrics that, all right, well, they're meeting our terms, we're getting paid the right ways. And then quality is coming in saying that there's food safety risks. Well, when you're trying to build a scorecard, you're trying to balance that math between the two. And both groups are going to look and say, well, my risk is more important than your risk, so put it higher on the list. And it just gets that much more convoluted when you have dozens of bigwigs in some of these companies with their risk profiles trying to combine it together in one register.
Yeah, it's the same with cybersecurity with vulnerability management. There's usually a color system 1 through 5. And I've been in rooms where I've had to slam my fist on the table and be like, look, the worst case scenario is death. Start there, because we get so granular with it. And in all reality, we're wasting time, because the people who actually want to hurt us have moved past this already. They don't care, right? They don't care if it's a SEV 5 or a SEV 1. They don't care. And I think if we created an overarching company risk acceptance and severity risks, maybe that would be better. If you attach it to, like you said before, if you quantitate it and you attach the financial to it, people kind of get that a little bit better. Maybe that's how we create a food protection culture inside of an organization, because we have this, these are our top 5. This is what we're going to always evaluate against no matter what happens for our organization. And our suppliers need to understand that this is what it looks like for us. Maybe that's an idea. If somebody tries it, let me know, because I would like to know.
Yeah, it would be good. I mean, it's one of those where you're setting your internal expectations and then expressing them to your supply base. And that's one of the things that we see in the food safety space, where you have supplier expectation manuals that they're really good, but sometimes they turn into phone books. And it's just like those internal policies. How do I write this thing general enough that one supplier of a chemical compared to a supplier of actual ready-to-eat food, how do I balance that so it's general enough that everybody's on the same page?
I was just thinking about it from terms of normal personness. We kind of have unset rules walking into each other's homes, right? We expect that you're not going to use the couch as a toilet. You're not going to leave dirty shoes everywhere. You're not going to trample through someone's house and make it just disgusting and unlivable. I don't know why we can't take that type of mentality into work. We all understand that, right? We got the basics of being a human and not being a bad human, right? Why can't we just take it into our jobs? We get it so convoluted, like you said. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. We just have to take it back to basics. Is this going to hurt people? Yes or no? Follow the flow chart. Maybe we need to start creating that as a part of risk acceptance in, a food company. Maybe it's us, James. Maybe it's just you and me. We're going to have to do it. But I think that would be amazing. And that way everybody gets a say and they understand this is what being a human in this company looks like. And then this is what the tech looks like around it, and how we're going to protect it. I think that could be a good start towards the future. And as we're coming to the close close of this, I give some advice to both the cybersecurity side of the house and to the food protection side of the house about, the future or anything you've learned in your career.
For me, it's one of those that you just have to talk to each other. We had this presentation a few weeks ago about food safety culture, and one of the things that we were talking about is trying to connect it to each individual department in a company. And I remember when I was working on the previous job, when you're trying to get IT to understand why food safety culture matters, it's like you work in a food company, but then they look at you like you have three heads. Like, well, I work on a computer. I'm not directly impacting the product. Why do I have to focus on food safety culture? And it's like, you have to think bigger picture. All right, you might be dealing with an IT request for something in a computer software system, but that request is for someone that could directly impact the product, and it's all connected. And that's one of the things that I wish everybody out there would just keep that view of, it's not just the four walls in your plant, it's everything is connected, be it IT and food safety protection, R&D to customers, all those different things are all connected, and it's all dominoes that have to fall the right way. And then when one domino falls the wrong way, the chain breaks and there could be catastrophe. Being able to see that from the perspective of that interconnectedness of all these systems.
I cannot agree any more to that. That is, yes, exactly. We are all interconnected. I mean, we have environmental systems that are one system, like water, for example. I love that you brought that IT bit up because I've also been on that soapbox multiple times. When I was sitting, it was a food professionals meeting talking about sanitation, and somebody asked a question like, where are all the other aspects inside of a food production facility potentially would be touched? And someone said R&D, which I was like, yeah, of course, But I kept quiet because I wanted to see if somebody else was going to say it, because I'm one of the only cybersecurity people there. But IT touches everything. And I think sometimes people forget because it's just a job, and they just suit up and walk in and fix whatever annoyance is happening for somebody and then get on with it, right? We still have to glove up. We still have to mask up. We still have to put the hairnets in. We still have to get the lab coats on, the boots, whatever you have to wear to go do this job. But we also are near the food. And sometimes you have to go fix a sensor that's on the line. You are on top of the food. You are on top of the food. And even though you're only fixing computers in the office, that doesn't mean you're not interacting with food. People are coming in from all aspects of the company into your area. But it's so interesting that you say that. That's great. That's so great, James.
If anybody wants to reach out, talk more, I'd like to talk more on that, just the food defense and the food safety culture and assessing in the supply chain. I think it's something that we as an industry have to put our heads together and kind of look at that to figure out, how do we wrap our heads around this? Because we've been trying to wrap our heads around food safety culture since Frank Giannis brought it to everyone, and now it's just slowly morphing, and that's the next iteration of it. So that's one thing that call out if people want to reach out and talk about it more. And then, like I said, just stay connected. It's so easy to just get so sunk into your role and your responsibility, and you just don't realize how much it connects the other departments, especially in like these large global companies that the silos exist, and the silos will just get bigger and bigger, and the fences between them will get larger. It's like, no, at the end of the day, we're making a food product that people should enjoy. So we should be working together so it's safe and the customer's happy and healthy.
Yeah, that's a tough one because cybersecurity is not very communicative. Like, we don't talk to each other. And if we do, it's sort of, I don't know, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole of the things, but there's a lot of shame. And this is something that I love about the food industry is you all talk to each other. You don't care what department you're from. You all hang out together. And you also have been really inclusive to me. I'm just this girl who's been doing IT and cybersecurity for a while. And you kind of just are like, hey, cool, come on, hang out with us. That's great. We'll talk about food and we'll talk about safety and we'll talk about culture. It's great. And I think that's the interesting, again, connection between our two spaces is cybersecurity awareness is almost kind of like cringy to us now. Like, we're like, oh, not that again, passwords and two-factor. But it has to be constantly said because it keeps happening, right? Same with anything that happens with food. We need to make these things so simple that it's a stop, drop, and roll moment. Like you get it. You know what you need to do when something happens. And we haven't reached that in either one of our cultures really yet. And I think that's probably like the way we have to start, James, like honestly. And I've been screaming this for a little bit. And that's just really fascinating. But so yes, we need to communicate more. If you're in cybersecurity IT, please open your mouth. You're at a food company, go share a lunch or wait for some tasting of frosting or something else that you need to go do and start talking to people because, we need to communicate together. Thanks for your time, James. This has been an awesome conversation. I actually feel really energized.
It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun. Have a good one.
All right, folks, that brings us to the end of today's episode. A huge thank you to all the listeners for tuning in and supporting the show. Your enthusiasm and dedication really do mean the world. Remember to stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.